Hi, thanks for joining us. Today's story once again takes us into the world of broken trust, hidden pain, tears, and lessons life forces us to learn.
Before I begin, I need to ask you something. Please, listen to this story till the very end. Don't judge me in the first few minutes. Don't decide who's right or wrong too soon. Because what I'm about to tell you is not just about love or betrayal. It's about what happens when the person you trust most becomes your deepest wound. This is my story. Every word is true. And for the first time, I'm ready to tell it. Exactly how it happened. The night it all ended, it was raining. I remember the thunder shaking the windows, and my hands shaking just as much. My husband's phone was lying on the table, screen glowing. One unread message. I don't know why I looked. Maybe some instinct that whispers to you when your world is about to change. I opened it, and there it was, her name, my best friend's name. I miss you already. Can't wait to feel your arms again. My world didn't explode in that moment. It just quietly fell apart. But let me start from the beginning. Because you need to know who I was before I became the woman who learned how to destroy her own heartbreak. My name is Elena Parker. I'm 32 years old, and I live in a small town in Oregon. I'm not someone special. At least, I didn't used to think so. I had a decent job as a graphic designer, a cozy apartment, a husband I thought was my forever, and a best friend who felt more like a sister. And if you told me back then that both of them would stab me in the back, I would have laughed in your face. You see, I believed in loyalty, in love, in people, until I realized that sometimes love doesn't die. It just transforms into something darker, something colder. I met Daniel, my husband, when I was 25. He was charming, confident, and knew exactly what to say. The kind of man who could make any woman feel like she was the only one in the world. And maybe that's why I fell so hard, because I was tired of being invisible. My best friend, Chloe, was there from the start. She cheered us on. She helped me plan our wedding. She even stood beside me as my maid of honor, smiling in every picture. I didn't know that smile would haunt me years later. Our marriage was good, at least, I thought it was. There were fights, sure, but every couple fights. What I didn't realize was that while I was fighting for us, he was fighting against me and Chloe. She was always there to comfort me, to listen, to say, "You deserve better, Elena." I just didn't know she meant herself. When I found out the truth, I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I didn't even cry. I smiled, because that was the night I decided I wouldn't just be a victim. I'd be their biggest mistake. The night after I saw that message, I didn't confront him. I just stared at him, asleep, peaceful next to me. And for the first time in 7 years, I didn't feel love. I felt curiosity. I wanted to see how far the lies went. So I started watching quietly, carefully. I noticed things I'd never seen before. How he suddenly took his phone to the bathroom. How he worked late but came home smelling like perfume I didn't own. I saw his shirts ironed differently. Her way, not mine. And Chloe? She was calling less often. The woman who used to share every silly detail of her day had suddenly gone quiet. But when she did call, her voice trembled, not with guilt, but with fear. Maybe she knew I was starting to see it. Maybe her conscience was whispering louder than his lies. I remember one Friday night. Daniel told me he had a client dinner. I smiled, kissed him on the cheek, told him, "Drive safe." Then I waited exactly 20 minutes, grabbed my keys, and followed him. My heart was pounding so loud, I could barely hear the engine. He drove across town to a small boutique hotel near the lake. I parked far enough away to stay unseen, and I watched. He didn't go inside alone. Chloe was already waiting by the entrance. They hugged, not like friends, not like people scared of being caught, but like lovers who had already crossed every line. And that's when I realized they'd been doing this for months, maybe years. I didn't confront them that night. I sat in my car for an hour, shaking, not from sadness, but from a kind of numbness I can't describe. When you love someone that deeply, the moment they betray you doesn't feel like an explosion. It feels like drowning in silence. I drove home, took a shower, and looked at myself in the mirror. I saw a woman who had given everything: loyalty, time, forgiveness, and received betrayal in return. That night, I promised myself one thing. If they could play games with my heart, I would learn to play smarter. The next morning, I started collecting proof screenshots, phone records, photos, everything. I wasn't just preparing for a confrontation, I was building a case. Because if there's one thing I learned, it's that revenge doesn't always mean fire. Sometimes it means patience. I started changing. I acted normal, cheerful, affectionate, supportive. I made breakfast, asked about his work, even suggested Chloe join us for dinner, like old times. You should have seen their faces, guilt written all over their smiles, panic hiding in their eyes. I wasn't the fool anymore. I was the storm they didn't see coming. The night of that dinner, I set the table perfectly: candles, wine, soft jazz, the picture of calm. Chloe arrived in her red dress, the same one she wore on my anniversary last year. I looked her in the eyes, smiled, and said, "You look beautiful tonight." And she said, "So do you." But we both knew she was lying. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Daniel tried to act casual, asking about work, about my day, pretending not to notice my every glance. And then I said something I'd been saving. "You know what's funny?" I said, pouring the wine. "How people can share so many secrets without even realizing it." Chloe froze. Daniel stopped mid-breath. I smiled. "To friendship," I said, raising my glass. None of them drank. That was the moment I knew I had them exactly where I wanted. I wasn't done, not even close. The real revenge hadn't even started yet. After that dinner, everything changed, not with a single blow, but with 1,000 small, deliberate steps. I had the proof: screenshots, photos from the boutique hotel, records of late-night texts and calls. I had receipts, the little things that reveal a life lived in secret. But proof alone isn't justice. Proof without purpose is just noise. I knew I had to be strategic. Angry words could be dismissed. A late-night post could be deleted and argued away. So I built a plan that would do two things: protect me and expose them in a way that couldn't be ignored. First, I backed everything up: multiple drives, cloud storage, even a trusted friend who lived out of state. Someone outside their orbit. I printed copies. I wrote dates and small notes on the margins like a detective preparing a case file. Everything had context. Everything had weight. Then I did something people don't often expect from a hurt person. I acted calm. I smiled at Daniel the next morning. I kissed him goodbye as he left for work. I made a joke about a TV show we both pretended to like. But I also started having work calls, meetings I took in coffee shops, documents to sign, emails that required my attention. I wanted a public record that I was stepping away. Subtle, clean, intentionally obvious. I reached out to a lawyer, not because I wanted a courtroom fight, but because a lawyer's letter carries a weight. A text message does not. A formal notice went to Daniel's work. Not an accusation in a corner bar, not a whispered rumor during coffee breaks. A professional, documented communication with dates and evidence attached. I wanted the people who paid him to know he had been living a double life. Cheating is a private sin. Lying to employers about your whereabouts and time off is a professional problem. That, I knew, was where the ripple would begin. At the same time I was doing the practical things, I started to turn the emotional screws I reached out to one person I knew would matter. His mother. Not to beg, not to berate, but to give her the truth plainly. She answered on the second ring. I remember her voice, thin, then brittle, then soft with worry. When I said Chloe's name, there was a silence that felt like an answer. She asked for the text I sent them. She thanked me quietly. I did the same with Chloe's closest friends, people who would believe receipts and photos more than whispers, not revenge for revenge's sake, but to ensure the truth lived somewhere outside my chest. The next move was the hardest. The confrontation with Chloe. People imagine confrontations as shouting matches on the street. For me, it was quiet. It was a face-to-face where all the theater was stripped away. I invited her to the cafe where we'd once shared secrets and cheap cakes. She arrived late, hands twisting a napkin like a guilty bird. She tried to smile. I sat down, put one of the printed screenshots on the table, and folded my hands around a cup of coffee. I know, I said. Not a question, not an attack, a statement. She looked at the photo, then at me, then at the window. Elena, she began, but the words came out small and paper thin. Why? I asked. Simple, plain, almost casual. She told me the story in pieces. Loneliness, a small thrill at first, a misunderstanding that became a secret, that became an affair. She cried, but her tears were for herself, not for me. They didn't apologize. They tried to explain. They begged for forgiveness. Soft and selfish, I listened. I placed the napkin over the photo and said, "You can leave now." She left. She walked out wearing the same red dress she wore that night. She swore she never meant to hurt me. I didn't say the words I wanted to say. Instead, I said this: "You took everything that wasn't yours." She didn't argue. When the news reached Daniel's workplace, it did what rumors rarely do. It confirmed itself. His manager called for a meeting. Questions came. He stumbled. He made excuses that would be laughable if they weren't his life. Late nights, business trips, stress. The company didn't want a scandal tied to a married man who misused time and trust. After one formal review and the presentation of a few hard facts, Daniel was given a choice he could not wriggle out of: explain the discrepancies or resign quietly. He chose the latter. The resignation was the first visible crack in the armor. Once there was a professional consequence, social consequences followed. Friends who had once turned a blind eye began to distance themselves. People who had liked convenient versions of their lives started to befriend more convenient people. Chloe's social circles cooled. Invitations stopped coming. Their names stopped carrying the same warmth. But there was something else I wanted. Not humiliation, but accountability. I wanted a clean cut. I wanted to ensure there was space to breathe. So I made a choice that surprised even me. I went public. Not on a screaming social post. Not on a smear campaign. I posted a short video, about 5 minutes, simply telling my story. No venom. No names at first. I spoke about trust, about learning, about being brave enough to leave. I explained how secrets can make small crimes against the people who love you most. Then I showed a single screenshot. Enough to anchor my words, I invited people who had been through similar things to talk. I asked for compassion, not gossip. The response was immediate and complicated. Some accused me of trying to ruin lives. Others offered their stories, their thanks, their tears. Many messaged to say they saw themselves in my silence. Some of Chloe's friends blocked her after reading my story. Daniel's mother called me, and we cried together quietly on the phone. The world is messy like that. The poor pay for the proud, the innocent for the guilty, but it was the truth that outlasted the noise. What surprised me most was how quickly the betrayal that once felt like a lead blanket started to lift. The exposure didn't erase the pain. It didn't restore the nights I'd wasted, the trust I'd misplaced, but it stopped the pretending. And stopping the pretending is the first step to healing. In the weeks that followed, I took small, stubborn actions to reclaim myself. I joined a small art class I'd always wanted to take. I reclaimed the spare room and turned it into a little studio. I started freelancing again and took on a client who valued me, not the version of me that existed inside someone else's lies. I dated, slowly, badly, sometimes awkwardly, but I dated in ways that reminded me romance doesn't have to be annihilation. It can be a conversation. Chloe texted me months later, "I'm so sorry, I'm getting help." I didn't reply. Daniel sent me an email, not an apology, but an explanation for his failings disguised as remorse. I read it and deleted it. Part of my revenge had been to walk away with my dignity and let time press on them. The other part was mercy, which oddly felt like its own kind of power. Revenge, I learned, is not a fire you set to someone else's house. Revenge, the kind that lands, is the quiet rebuilding of everything they thought they'd taken. It is the art of living well in the light they tried to steal. And that art takes time, patience, and not a little grace for yourself. I won't pretend everything was perfect. There were nights the loneliness crept back like a cold floor under bare feet. There were moments I wondered if the woman I'd been had all been a lie, but the difference now was this. My story was mine to tell. I didn't have to make myself small to keep someone else large. And yet, even as I rebuilt, something unexpected was happening. A door I thought closed was beginning to open, not with Daniel or Chloe, but with a truth that had been waiting for space to breathe. I was discovering who I was without them. There's a scene ahead that I didn't want to rush into, the moment when the final pieces fall and the true cost of their betrayal becomes public in a way that changes them forever. But that moment deserves its own hour of quiet. And when you're ready, I'll tell you exactly how the last act played out. For now, know this. Exposure did not heal me instantly. It didn't erase the nights of pain. But it was the turning point. The place where silence stopped protecting the betrayers and started protecting me. I took the evidence. I told the truth. And I lived on the other side of it. If you're listening and you're thinking about what to do next, hold on to this one idea. Truth is the tool that frees you, not shouting, not destroying. Truth. You know, people say time heals everything. They're wrong. Time doesn't heal. It just reveals what's broken, what's true, and what's meant to stay. After that night, the night I walked away, everything felt empty. The silence of my apartment echoed louder than any argument I'd ever had. I thought freedom would feel like peace, but for the first few weeks it only felt like loss. I'd lost Daniel, I'd lost Chloe, but most of all, I had lost trust. Still, I promised myself one thing. I would never let the darkness that hurt me become the darkness that defined me. So, I worked. I healed in small ways, journaling, late-night walks, therapy sessions where I cried more than I spoke, and slowly I began rebuilding. Not just my life, but myself. Justice, I learned, doesn't always arrive with sirens or loud moments. Sometimes it comes in whispers, in the quiet way truth spreads when you least expect it. A few months after I left, I heard from a colleague that Daniel and Chloe's dream life was cracking. Their company, built on charm and manipulation, started losing clients after someone exposed how Daniel had falsified documents. No one knew who leaked the files, but deep down, I think he knew it was karma, not me. And Chloe? Her shining influencer career? Gone. People discovered her followers were bought. her brand deals fake, her apologies rehearsed. The same crowd that once adored her now whispered behind her back. It wasn't revenge. It was simply truth catching up. The same truth they tried to bury under lies and guilt. And as for me, I found something much greater than revenge. I found peace. It's strange. When you stop chasing justice, life finds a way to hand it to you in its own time. A small publishing house reached out to me after I posted an article about emotional resilience. They wanted me to write a column about betrayal, forgiveness, and survival. I hesitated, but then I realized maybe my story wasn't meant to end in bitterness. Maybe it was meant to help others find light in their own darkness. So I wrote. Every word felt like pulling a thorn from my heart, and people read it. They connected. They thanked me. That's when I understood. The truest justice isn't what happens to others. It's what happens within you. One evening, months later, I sat at a cafe where Daniel and I once spent hours dreaming of the future. But this time, I wasn't crying. I was smiling. I looked out the window, at the sunset melting into the horizon, and whispered, "Thank you, God, for taking away what was destroying me, even when I begged you to let me keep it." Maybe that's how divine justice works, not by striking down the guilty, but by lifting up the broken, by giving them the strength to rebuild higher than before. And that's what I did. I've rebuilt, not with hate, not with revenge, but with grace. So if you're listening to this, heart heavy, betrayed, lost, remember this. The pain that tried to destroy you might one day become the story that saves someone else. Because in the end, every tear does have a lesson.
If this story found a place in your heart or reminded you of your own journey through betrayal, heartbreak, and hard-earned lessons, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more real stories of courage, justice, and healing. Your support helps us keep these powerful voices alive. So that's all for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you next time.